For this spoiler discussion on Superman, I'm joined with Martin Lakin, who runs the Caped Wonder Europe website and the Restore Superman 4 Facebook page. I've known Martin since the late 90s, and he has been on this channel before, as we explored our history with Christopher Reeve's final outing as the Man of Steel. Martin provides his thoughts on James Gunn's new take on Superman, as we go into detail about the film's plot and a few of the movie's surprises. You're fully aware of my thoughts on the new Superman film. I thought generally it was entertaining, it was funny. David Corenswet is a great Superman. Rachel Brosnahan is a great Lois Lane. I think fantastic chemistry. I think it's the highlight of the film for me. The story is the biggest problem. We don't get an origin story. For me, I felt like we were thrown into a TV show where we've missed the first few episodes. The action was a bit jumbled up and messy in places. I think the third act gets a bit CG heavy, and seeing stuff we've kind of seen before. And the production design outside the fortress and the Daily Planet is I thought was surprisingly cheap and didn't have much character to it. And the score was a big problem, by John Murphy and David Fleming. I was expecting a certain type of movie, and I kind of got it, but I think the story itself and how it's edited is quite relentless. Doesn't really stop for many breathers. And the Justice Gang, though they are interesting, Guy Gardner and Mr. Terrific and Hawkgirl. Hawkgirl we don't get to know much about, but I was kind of mixed when I came out, and I still am a little bit mixed on it. I've seen it once. I did have the opportunity to see it again the other day, but it was just too hot. I was like, no, I'm not going to. I can't be bothered to go to the cinema. But Martin, you haven't told me your thoughts on the film, and I'm very intrigued to hear what you have to say.
I think it's pretty important, first of all, to make it clear that even hardcore Superman fans do not want other Superman projects to fail. They want to back them, they want them to be successful, and they want to like them. As generations go by and iterations change, I think that's kind of sometimes harder and harder to do. So this James Gunn's picture, I don't think we are its intended audience. And by that I mean that where we are right now, in terms of the huge tidal wave of social media that we're experiencing, the state of the world right now, it's James Gunn's film is so completely on point with all of that the older audience, our generation, the Christopher Reeve generation, let's say, we're already priced out of that. So it's not for us. There are tropes, there are things that we recognize, all the characters and all the situations that we know and love are in place, but they are not as we know them. And I think Gunn was kind of clever to give him credit. I think he was kind of clever to say, well, you know what, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it from the point of view of I'm going to just make it completely mine, which is why the picture starts with kind of like, I think what you said about it being like a TV film was pretty well observed, but to start with text which kind of reads more like a disclaimer than anything else. When you read it, it's like, well, 300 years ago this happened, and all of a sudden there's metahumans, and so as a kind of, Jesus, what would you call yourself, a traditional Superman fan? You see the word metahuman and you're like, a what? What? So 300 years ago, who? And then it's like, then 30 years ago there was this, and I'm like, there was? And then, then there's 3 hours ago there's like, he did. And then 30 minutes ago, he smashes into the ice and you're like, oh, okay, so this is what you're setting up. But I don't recognize anything that you've just said. So while I'm processing that and I'm going, well, I've seen this already in the trailer. I've seen this entire sequence in the trailer. Why did you put the entire beginning of your picture in the trailer? That's odd.
I don't think they should have released that sneak preview, that 5-minute preview, because I sat there straight away. I've seen this. I know what's happening. And then quite a large, maybe 30 minutes of the movie, I was like, I kind of know where this is all going. And that's my fault. I've gone up my way to watch these things, but sometimes they just pop up on social media and you watch it because you're a fan and you want to see something, and we're all kind of guilty of that. So I would say moving forward in future, don't release 5-minute previews of stuff, because when you want to have some surprises along the way.
And there wasn't anything within the first, within the I suppose you'd call it the exposition of the picture, that you were kind of like, well, let's crack onto something that we don't know. And so, yeah, and then we move on pretty swiftly. And your observations about the film does not take a single breath. It goes from scene to scene to scene to scene, and you barely have time to go, oh, okay, that's okay. And then boom, we're in Metropolis, as the saying goes. It took me quite a while to warm up, because the next scene where Clark and Lois are in the apartment, and then we're established that they are in a relationship already. I didn't like the fact they were kind of having fun about the fact they were being deceitful to their colleagues together. I thought that was a bit weird, a bit off. I thought Corin Sweat, there is a sweetness about him. He's very reminiscent of Kirk Allen. He looks, I can't make the difference out between, he's got that kind of floppy curly hair thing going on, and his voice is similar too.
He's only Clark Kent once, though, isn't he, in the film? I thought they would have deployed that more often. We never actually get to see him. Obviously, this is a spoiler discussion. Never see him transform into Superman. I was like, come on! No. The marketing has these kind of pictures where he's kind of transforming in the public's eye, like sort of like the people walking past him. I thought, the iconic moment you don't use.
See, you're doing it again. You're making that mistake. It's not a picture for our demographic. It's not for us. It's for the kids. It's for everybody that, it's for all the influencers. It's for all of not necessarily the comic book fans. It is for a cinema audience. And Gunn nobody's more aware of this than Gunn, because if you watch the Galaxy, I nearly call it Galaxy Rangers. Oh my God.
Galaxy High.
Guardians of the Galaxy, ladies and gentlemen. If you watch those, they are the same kind of thing. His cleverness as the director, if you like, his ability to manipulate. I think if you watch Guardians 3, and his ability to kind of get you to care about CGI animals, which on the face of it is ridiculous. But when you watch that picture and you see what, you kind of watch Rocket Raccoon's journey, which all this, it's just silliness to me.
That was a very difficult watch for me. I found it very upsetting.
Yeah, I watched it with my 11-year-old son, and he looked at me with tears in his eyes during that moment and says, "Dad, can we turn this off?" And I was like, wow. I was like, yeah, well, let's see it through, because if I know anything about this guy, there's always some redemption at the end, and luckily there is. But I thought, wow, afterwards, wow, how smart is he that he's able to do that? That he's able to get us to care about something that doesn't even exist. It's not even a tangible thing. And yet there he is. And he managed to do it again halfway through the picture, but we'll get to that. But the point you made about Clark is, I think that David was kind of robbed there as a performer. Because if I'm like, well, you can see what his Clark was building up to be. He's shambolic. There's a suggestion of Chris's performance there, but I mean, he's hunched, he's a bit gawky, they would call him loser. All that was great, but his voice is very deep. I think he tried to go the other way. I think rather than being high pitched, I think his voice was in his boots. And then this business about the glasses, the hypno glasses.
I thought that was just an in joke, that because Guy Gardner says he wears these hypno glasses to fool people, right? And that was James Gunn had then revealed. Like, it was in one of the comics of the 70s or 60s or something like that.
Earlier than that, I believe. I think it was the 60s, maybe even the 50s that was put across. Because that's the kind of thing that they did. And the whole picture, because you can tell the era that he was reading, Gunn, to do his research. It wasn't bronze. It was most definitely Silver Age that he's invested himself in. With all this huge kind of... and again, the way he established his world... very early, well, it's the first thing he did. He established his world and his parameters very early on. So it's like, there are metahumans here. This is not your Earth. This is my Earth, and anything can go on my Earth. So if you don't like it, kind of thing, Superman traditionalist or hardcore Superman fan or Snyderverse fan or whatever the hell you are, I don't really care, because this is my universe, and anything that I want to put in my universe can stay in my universe. And if I want to rationalize Clark Kent's disguise by not pushing David to do, what Chris did. I mean, Christopher Reeve didn't need an excuse like that to to separate characters, and I don't think David does either. I think he's that caliber of actor that he could have said, "Look, I want to do my version of what I think that this character could be to distinguish himself from the guy in the cape." I think he's perfectly capable of doing that. So I think it was a bit shortchanged there. But yeah, to get back to the scene where he comes off as a bit whiny and a bit immature with Lois, and he's just trying to put his point across in terms of this business about these warring factions, which is far too on the nose with what's going on right now.
I felt it was ham-fisted. I thought it was clumsily done and very sort of base level kind of execution. It felt a little bit like you're seeing offcuts of the conflict in the Suicide Squad movie he had, where this kind of fictional country has kind of got this, wants to take over and get this alien star beast or whatever it is. It's hidden underground, and that felt, and the production design kind of mirrored that, and weirdly, because Lex is trying to, because he's obviously selling arms to this guy and he wants to take over the land. Again, Lex dealing with land again. When he showed you the map, and I was just waiting for Otisburg to be on there, right? Yeah. And Otis is in it. That's a throwaway line. This kind of big black guy, and he's like, "Otis, flick that switch," whatever. And I was like, "Oh right, okay." He didn't introduce him, But then you've got the politics of this contemporary kind of events, and it's not that far removed from Superman 4, because Ultraman in the film, Ultraman to me was always a Japanese character. Okay, Ultraman in this,
right?
Is a clone of Superman, and is that, to me, was that. I thought at first, is this Bizarro? I didn't know. Right, okay. What's your thoughts on that?
So, again, it's my universe, it's my metahumans, I can do what I like. And if I want to call somebody Ultraman, then that's what I'll do. That big reveal, halfway through, where he becomes the Winter Soldier. Sorry, where he becomes the Superman clone. I took a breath, actually, because it's like, well, you made a Superman clone from a strand of his hair. And I'm like, so we're acknowledging Superman 4 as something that was one of your influences here, which I thought was fantastic. I was like, oh, okay. So, whether deliberately or not, you have thrown the spotlight onto something that we really are passionate about, which is, I couldn't thank him enough.
T-shirt.
Really. I was like, how terrific that's what he's done. And I thought that I'd second guessed the ending, or at least the post-credit scene. I thought, I know what's going to go on here. And I was so disappointed when this didn't come off. I thought that, because you know how he rids himself of Ultraman, he sticks him in the pocket universe or wherever it is. I thought that the post-credit scene would be Ultraman, Winter Soldier, emerges the other side of the pocket universe into another dimension, and he eventually recovers, kind of like the three villains from Superman 2. And in front of him is the square Bizarro world, and he heads towards Bizarro world. And then, as he's doing it, as he enters the atmosphere, he starts to crystallize. He starts to break down and crystallize. And then when he lands on the planet, and there are other beings there, they'll look upon him, and they all kind of fall to their knees like he's some kind of deity that's just arrived. Cut to black. I thought, wow, what a great idea that is. And then when we got, the whole audience in my screening sat there, waiting patiently for this Marvel type reveal to happen. And then it just turns out to be a conversation about whether a building or not is aligned, and then he says, I can be such a jerk sometimes. And everybody got out of their chairs in disgust and walked away. I thought, wow, way to go, James.
I thought we were going to get something more revealing than that, because we had two post-credit things. One was sitting on the moon with the dog, which is a very quick animated sequence. It felt like I was watching a screensaver that kind of moved slightly. And then at the end, you see this little bickering argument between him and Mr. Terrific. And but obviously before that, the audience went wild when Supergirl turned up. And because a friend has said to me a couple of weeks ago, oh, Krypto is not Superman's dog. It was always Supergirl's. I went, really? I suppose I hadn't read a certain comic run that the dog was hers, it's always in my mind, in the 50s or 60s, he had the dog, and the dog would like kind of randomly turn up throughout the decades. But then when the dog knocks her out, you know, the audience were laughing their ass off, and I found it amusing, but I was kind of somewhat concerned about this interpretation of Supergirl, because from whatever, you know, interpretation of the character that's been in the comics, where she's had a more of a difficult upbringing than Superman. She's seen more horrible stuff in her life, hence why that there may be an alcoholic problem, you know.
All of these crazy Superman family tropes that he's obviously a big fan of, because it just blows the whole thing wide open. He is not restricted to making a picture that is limited to 1970s New York and the technology of the time. He doesn't have to subscribe to that. I don't know why I'm defending it, because my fundamental problem with this film, the biggest issue I have with it, was the introduction of Supergirl. I thought it was pandering to that cinema audience. She didn't come off well. Yes, it might have been funny, but you know, that's no way to set up a character that you're going to spend X billion dollars on for an upcoming picture where we're supposed to care about it. You know, it wasn't funny enough, and it wasn't strong enough an introduction to kind of peg that kind of responsibility onto. And the second huge issue I had with it was this whole business about the message, the Jor-El message, where it eventually transpires that the second half of the message is basically instructions to conquer. Now, I think that's touched upon in some kind of Elseworlds graphic novel or something. It's not the first time that idea has been mooted.
Did John Byrne comic ever explore that Superman was there to sort of conquer? I don't think it was.
In Man of Steel, in John Byrne's Man of Steel, he wasn't the benevolent Jor-El that we know and love. He wasn't the Brando Jor-El. He was but he still wasn't that. So the idea that, I mean, from my perspective, and hopefully a lot of Superman fans' perspective, Superman is who he is because of his Kryptonian heritage, not in spite of it. So what you have now in Gunn's film is that you have him making up his own idea about what it is that his mission is and what his job is, and that's kind of providing him with the angst that this particular Superman has, and the insecurity that he has, and you know, he's not like other Supermen. He's not like Christopher Reeve, where we've already established in Donner's film that he's had 12 years of education that way. And so he's fully prepared by the time he comes out to kind of begin his mission, if you like. Because, you know, Jor-El was that smart. And I don't think that, you know, Jor-El is too smart to try and send his own son to another planet to dominate it. Because if they're talking about, you know, years and years of interplanetary war, he's not going to send his own son to somewhere to start that kind of thing again. That doesn't make any sense.
Superman argues that potentially this could be mistranslation of the message. That's not the message, right? But he is kind of like the Justice Gang. I think Mr. Terrific says, well, that is kind of, experts say this is correct.
It's real, yeah.
But by the end of the film, you kind of, well, the message is still jumbled up, and we don't know the full answer to that. So with the sequel, which I'm sure will happen, there will be answers to that. Now, do you think this film should have had some sort of flashbacks or an origin story there? Didn't have to be a 45-minute thing like Superman the movie, you know, but to sort of set the groundwork so many people didn't go in feeling like, I'm a bit lost here. Or were you kind of satisfied with that? Because, you know, having text at the beginning, reminiscent of Superman Returns, Judge Dredd deployed it, the Stallone one, so it does feel like a shortcut. But people were saying, like, even before it came out, oh, it's got a Star Wars credit crawl. And I went, what? With the credits like this, like Superman 3, where you got all the text there. But it wasn't like that. It's just a few sentences to say, as you were saying earlier, this is my world. This is what happened. There are metahumans. But I felt more was needed.
This is Gunn we're talking about again. I think that he couldn't wait to kind of get past that. I think recently he was quoted as to say, there's things I never want to see again. I don't want to see Uncle Ben getting shot. I don't want to see Superman leaving Krypton. I think that he was so obsessed with kind of getting this story up and running because, you know, of the attention span of the modern audience. The picture's called Superman, right? And there is you take with you, I don't care who you are, you take with you a certain amount of expectation. But if you get to a film and you'll believe every bugger can fly, then you've stripped away what it is fundamentally that makes the character so appealing. Because, you know, nobody's going, even though he does a few scenes where it's like, oh, wow, it's Superman. But then, you know, oh, wow, it's Mr. Terrific. Oh, wow, it's Green Lantern. Oh, wow, it's Girl, because we're all doing the same thing. Then he's kind of getting lost in the mix. And then you add to the fact that this particular iteration of the character spends his entire time getting his arse handed to him. I mean, he's beaten thoroughly. And he is saved by his dog. He is saved by the other members of his team. When I go to a Superman picture, I don't necessarily want to see that. I want to see him overcome his own kind of problems. I want to see... Oh, I mean, okay, there's a case to be made that Miss Tessmacher saves him in the first picture and that relies on, you know, the goodwill of other people to help him. But then those are human beings. This is, you know, if you're going to do a scene later on with Lex Luthor where the dog basically does what happens with Loki and the Hulk in the Avengers, we've seen a lot of it before. I mean, when the world starts splitting up, I mean, you could have cut in some stock footage from Superman Returns into that. A lot of the stuff with the flying is so reminiscent of Superman and Lois, where they do these jump cuts where you do that and then you cut directly to something that the eye can't focus on.
Well, it's the stuff with the sort of fish-eyed lens kind of, which Black Adam had deployed. I think Guardians 3 has that sort of thing. And I say in my review, filmmakers don't tend to shoot like that because it does look weird and doesn't look thrilling to watch. I mean, it's kind of, I don't know. There's like one or two shots where, because me and you, we love seeing, you know, Christopher Reeve fly. He made it believable. He sells it really well, and I don't understand why filmmakers or even actors can't translate that to sort of say, oh, this is how you fly, because Chris was a pilot. He knew, you know, how to move his body. In this, there's a couple of shots where he's fighting the kaiju. It looks photorealistic. It's like, wow, that's really well done, because there's some of it is live action, and but there wasn't any kind of big Superman moments to really wow me, because one, the editing was so fast and frantic, and the format, the aspect ratio, doesn't kind of lend itself to what makes Superman kind of visually interesting on screen. I think you need to shoot scope. Yeah,
there were no huge vistas. There was no time to kind of, I mean, by rights, the Fortress CG or whatever I mean, you can't even call it the Fortress of Solitude anymore, can you? There's more people in there, or robots in there than anything else. But I don't mind there being robots. He's got like a laboratory and things like that. I'm like, it's fine. I'd love for him to have that sort of the John Byrne. Is it John Byrne? I don't know. I can't remember which one. It is kind of floating chair he sat in. You know what I mean? It's a computer screen, and I thought that would be quite cool, but he doesn't have that. Yeah. But again, you're just kind of like, you know, let's see it. I know that it's mobile and it does this thing where it always rises and stuff, but can we just have a couple of establishing shots where we can, you know, just take in the scale of it all and kind of the spectacle. That was what it was short of. Everything was so closed in, and it was so boxed and so frenetic with the editing, like you say, that there was no time to kind of appreciate anything. And so, you know, it's incredible, isn't it, that we're in the year 2025 and we're still using the same technique as they did in the 1950s, where Kirk Kelly would jump and then animation would take over. That's in principle, that is exactly what is happening now, except that it's CG. So poor David would just jump up, you know, eyes up here, pal, and just go, and then CG cuts in and off he goes. As opposed to, I mean, you're right, everybody's using it now. It was in Black Adam, it's all these flying scenes seem to be this business now. Whereas, you know, he had the opportunity and the money. I mean, let's not forget that this is an extraordinarily expensive motion picture that he could have said to, you know, was it Weta and
ILM and Framestore.
If it was me and it wasn't, I would have gone in and said, right, guys, I want you to show me I want you to show me what you could do. I want you to show me how much we've advanced in the last 40 years since this picture. Because this guy, with nothing but a pair of cables and a leather harness, managed to take off like a private jet convincingly. 40 years ago. What can you do for me? Would be my demand. And yet here we are, and we're still...
Well, this is like proper nerds visual effects ideas, but they could have deployed the same stuff they use in Mandalorian, where they got the 360 front projection screens, and then have him on a board, and you've got that sort of, you're photographing the background with the foreground, and it doesn't look like you're just comping in a blue screen effect or green screen.
Absolutely.
You know, it's sort of similar. It's like updating the Zoptic stuff to now, and do it that way. But I mean, that's because we want to see certain visual effects shots like that. But now I think that's kind of it's not really concerned anymore. They don't need to tell people, to show people that or make you believe a man can fly. But everyone can do it. So that goes in step with your complaint about, well, everyone can fly in this. So it takes away some of the magic of Superman. And now, Aussie Crypto, we've kind of discussed a few times. Did you find the dog kind of entertaining, or do you thought it was somewhat problematic having the dog?
It does nothing for me, personally. I'm so glad that it's connected with modern audiences from the point of view as keeping this character alive and keeping him relevant. But, you know, and I'm glad for folks. Every time there's an iteration of Batman, every time there's an iteration of Barney, every time if people are happy with it and it maintains its popularity, I'm glad. I don't have to like it. I can be entertained by it, and you know, it kind of harkens back to this business about the Snyder guys. I mean, you got to admire their passion for one thing, and this whole business about what they did to Henry and everything. But you know, for me, what Snyder did was its own thing, the same way that Gurner's done his thing, and you didn't have to like it. It turns out that, you know, some of the hardcore Snyder fans, they really do. I found Man of Steel, controversially or not, I found that unwatchable. I thought that was so completely removed from what the I don't know, not the idealisms, that's the wrong word, but what the fundamental basis of the Superman character is, that it might as well have been about something or somebody else. What he did in terms of Batman, I mean, there's a sequence in, I don't know if it's Batman versus Superman, where Affleck does a huge punch up in a warehouse. I thought, Jesus,
yeah, Batman v Superman, yeah.
Right. If you could just do 2 hours of that, mate, you've got us all on side. That's all it took. If you want to do a Batman picture and you just want to stuff it with that kind of thing, you got a fan in me. But he didn't do that. He went off on all kinds of weird tangents. But in fairness to him, he did Watchmen that was good. You know, I just struggled with. I mean, I remember being in the cinema watching Man of Steel, and when those dildo-shaped spaceships took off, I was so fundamentally embarrassed that I was wearing a Superman t-shirt at the time, and I walked out the cinema like that because I was like, I can't be associated with that. And just my final point on this, before I never speak about Man of Steel again, is that I understand that, you know, Henry Cavill was kind of left out to dry, and despite everybody's attempts at saving that iteration of the franchise, Dwayne Johnson did his bit as well. That, you know, he looked the part, but I find Henry Cavill personally possibly the most frustrating actor of modern times, because I find myself every time that I'm watching him, and this isn't just Superman, because I did my research with him. I went and kind of watched everything that he was in. And even something like Enola Holmes, where he plays Sherlock, and even in Mission Impossible. And I am sat there waiting for him, just absolutely dying for him to do something, anything. Just show me something. I can't take it anymore. Are you deliberately being non-charismatic? Are you just being such complete cardboard because that's what you've decided this part is? Or are you... But it's always the same. And I'm screaming for him to do something, to scream, to shout, to enunciate, just do anything. But he's so utterly flat.
But David Corenswet has gone back to what we all know and love about Superman, really. He has the kindness, he's humble, he's kind of somewhat, he's a bit nerdy, and he kind of makes fun of himself. You know what I mean? And I think if that resonates with new Superman fans, I'm like, great, then I'm happy, because that's what Superman is supposed to be like. You know, it's a bit goofy. It's not a copy of Reeve. There's shades of Reeve in his performance, but it's his own interpretation, and I'm happy with that. It's interpretation in the right direction, because you know your frustrations with Man of Steel and mine, which I've expressed before and recently in a retrospective. But I think once you start stripping away the fundamental elements of Superman, it's no longer Superman.
Yeah,
and it's even the simple things, even the red trunks, even the split curl, even the sort of the difference in interpretation of Clark and Superman, how his secret identity. If there's no difference between them, then the fundamental things that what makes Superman work, the foundation, collapse. And that's why Spider-Man, through all these movies, the Spider-Man movies, he's the same. Absolutely the same. And it works every time. And the same with Ninja Turtles. So many different interpretations. You've got the all ugly Michael Bay movies he produced, but the Turtles are still the same. You still recognise them. And that's what I didn't recognise in Man of Steel and Henry's Superman. But in this, with David, I recognise that Superman.
You're far more eloquent than I managed to be. But I mean, even speaking about it makes, gets a rise out of me.
Makes your piss boil.
You're right. I think that you're right. I mean, if David Superman is the way forward, then I'm happy that the kids are looking at him and they're saying, that's a good guy. That's the way that that's how somebody should behave morally in a given situation. For me, I think he's still a bit limp isn't the right word, but he's not. I prefer my Superman to be a bit more assured and a bit more stoic. I give you the example of when in Superman the movie he shoves through into Luthor's lair and he doesn't speak and he just turns his head and glares, and that's what he says. It's open, come in. That it's so beautiful. And in terms of this business about the kiss code and the trunks, it's like, you know what? Why should there be an endless debate about all that kind of stuff? It's like, well, you show a picture of him, that's what he wears. So
yeah,
that's the character. If I present a picture of Batman to you and go, well, yeah, that's Batman right there, and you go, well, does he have to have the ears? What are they for? Do they serve any for? Well, I guess. And then costume designers start throwing their interpretation at it, and This picture is no different. I found the suit to be extremely clunky.
Yeah, I still have my issues with it. I mean, because the neck collar thing and sort of the weird patterns, it's a bit chunky. Suit, the fabric's quite thick. But I think that because it kind of retains the original look and it's colourful. I mean, the Superman Returns suit tried to retain those original elements, but the colours are all off and proportions are different. I mean, Brandon Routh has a different type of body, hence why he's kind of a longer torso, isn't he? Right. But yeah, and the cape was all wrong, and the sort of some people who are fans of Superman and how there's different costumes have been interpreted over the years. I mean, when you stick to what's the core look of Superman, it would always kind of work. And even when you watch old episodes of Dean Cain, Lois and Clark, it looks cheap, but it still pops off the screen, and that's what makes people heads turn.
Yeah, well, he was conceived as a pulp character. The basis of the costume was lifted from circus strongmen, and the reason that they're from circus strongmen is because it was a practical thing. So the boots, the tights, the separate trunks and such like are all there to facilitate the movement. So if you can't, that's all it would take as a design brief to go, oh, okay, this is a guy that supposedly can defy gravity and fly. He's going to need the most amount of movement you can get out of something. So to put him in something like that, which again, it follows the Guardians of the Galaxy design aesthetic, I suppose, and it ties in with what the Justice guys were doing as well. So overall, it's fine, but I don't see why you should have to subscribe to anything particularly. Again, that's the costume. There's plenty of latitude to do within that framework to do whatever you like in terms of the fabric. The biggest problem I have, I mean, you illustrate perfectly about Brandon, for example, Brandon's suit. it's like sometimes they don't even look at the performer. Like you say, Brandon was had a very long torso and shorter legs. So the answer to that is that you bring everything up. You bring the waistline higher. You make the boots longer. You shorten the cape. Yeah, all these changes would have made a big difference to Brandon, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
Rather giving clunky motorcycle boots and, you know, a great big vinyl blanket for a cape. It just...
One thing, okay, because Jim Bowers, our friend, had messaged me and said about Jimmy Olsen. Now, Jimmy Olsen's a photographer, right? But he never uses a camera in the film, and I hadn't clocked. And when he told me, I went, "Holy shit! He never uses a camera. He never takes a photograph." But he's become this babe magnet, and that's the joke. I thought to myself, it's a bit like the other guys with Will Ferrell and Mark Wahlberg, where Will Ferrell doesn't realise all these women fancy him, and Mark Wahlberg's like, what's going on? He's like baffled. But that was, and also I think Lois makes a comment that it seems to be all these women are attracted to Jimmy, and he's no longer the sort of, I don't know, a bit of a pest and a bit of an annoyance to Perry White. He's just like a cool guy in the office who you've seen Miss Eve Tessmacher's obsessed with, and other women in the office are still sort of, you know, eyeing him up. I love they included Jimmy and he had more time in it, and he's sort of doing some investigating, right? So, you know, he's another, I suppose he's a researcher at the Daily Planet, but he's not really the Jimmy I recognised.
Whereas Jimmy, for want of a better word, was always considered to be geeky before. Nowadays, in this day and age, geeks are the cool guys. So that's what happens. So Jimmy goes from, I mean, Jimmy's the one that breaks the story in this film.
Yeah.
Because of his connection to Miss Tessmacher. Jimmy's the smarts that has got the connection that blows the lid off the entire thing. So that's how far geeks have come, if you like. That's the world we're living in now. He's not a photographer because this is James Gunn's world, and James Gunn can have anything he likes, and this is what he does with his particular character. It's such a shame that the character of Eve, even to a general audience, people that don't know who Miss Tessmacher is, would have recognised it if somebody had shouted Miss Tessmacher.
Yeah.
At the end, where Lex Luthor throws a mug of pencils at her, the opportunity for him to scream Miss Tessmacher was so entirely wasted, because right up until that point, I don't think the audience knew or cared who she was. She was just Lex's girlfriend. But, you know, she was a creation of, I don't know if she was Puzo's or whether she was Mankiewicz, but she belongs to the original pictures. She doesn't belong to the comics. She's not in the comics at all. So, you know, if you're going to call homage, that was the time to do it. It's like, oh, it's Miss Tessmacher from the films. And Jimmy's, you know, if you'd have come up to me and said, you're not going to believe this, but like, this whole picture fundamentally hinges around Jimmy Olsen, who's not a photographer. He's in a relationship with Miss Tessmacher. I'd have been like, what? It just on the face of it, it doesn't make any sense, but it works for this particular picture. I think that's some of their best comedic moments, especially when she was sending him over all the evidence and he was having a celebration. I thought that was fun. You know, it's all fun, but that's again, if you're looking for substance, you're not going to find it here. If you're looking for fun, there's plenty to be had. But it's so overstuffed with fun that it's tripping over itself. And when it does get to drama, I mean, the most dramatic scene, I don't know if you'll agree here, the most dramatic scene in it is when you've got Nicholas Holt's Lex in that pocket universe with those in that cubic prison.
Yeah.
And he's got that regular guy and he's playing Russian roulette with him. And all I thought at that point was, with this material, with this script, wouldn't Kevin Spacey have done this better? Because with Nicholas Hoult, he's so sweet. I mean, even though he's playing a nut, and he's kind of, I think he's supposed to be reminiscent more of people like, oh, I don't know, Elon Musk or Mark, what's his face? I think he's meant to be not as in your face as Eisenberg was, but I think he's meant to be that thread. I still can't see him doing the kind of things that Lex is supposed to be doing in this picture. Whereas Kevin Spacey, I think you believe it, he'd murder his own grandmother given the opportunity. So when you know, with that kind of, especially that speech he has at the end, that business about the envy. I think if Spacey did that and he was unhinged, I think that would have really hit home, because he's that much older and he's got that much more gravitas, and you'd really believe he was a threat. Whereas, you know, this Lex Luthor just comes up as somebody that has an entire crew around him that just play video games. Literally, in the sense that that's how he defeats him. Which also reminded me of Superman 3, by the way, when we were trying to defeat him by Atari.
Yeah, because he's giving Ultraman commands, like he's set commands he has to go through, like it's like a combo in a fighting game.
Yeah,
and
27B, 47A, all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
and I'm like, what is actually going on here? And I'm totally lost. And my 11-year-old is going, yeah. I'm like, oh god, okay.
Do you think this is I suppose because of its relentlessness and its you know, it's throwing a lot at the screen, it's a very stuffed script. Do you think it's more for the sort of new generation who have somewhat of a shorter attention span, down to social media and TikTok, that things have to move along at a quicker pace because people may get bored? But I felt the middle act was a little bit saggy, and I was like, come on, you need to get along here. Because when Mr. Terrific, he finds out where the teleporter is, or the device to get into the pocket universe, this whole 360 action sequence where Lois is at the centre and it's filmed there,
yeah.
It just dragged on. And I said, I've seen this before. And once we get into the pocket universe and Superman saves Metamorpho's child, as he, you know, because obviously he's been affected by kryptonite because Metamorpho can create it, and he sort of changes his mind and lets Superman free. And when he goes down this river, which I thought looked like something out of Minecraft, this kind of weird pixel kind of river, it was the most messy sequence ever, because I couldn't really make out what was going on. And that sort of summarised to me that outside of a few action sequences, with most of the action is very messy and shot with extreme close-ups. And I'm like, that's one of the biggest problems I have with modern action, where it's often the case when you compare Hong Kong cinema to Western cinema, where they knew how to shoot action, where the Americans didn't really do it, like fight sequences. But in the case of this, it's like, well, we've seen many films before, superhero films like, you know, Batman Begins or whatever, they shoot the action extremely well, wide angles, you can see everything. This, I couldn't see everything, and I was like, this is a bit messy. And for the cost of the movie, I mean, you know, outside of the big visual effects, everything didn't quite look spectacular. Didn't look great. It looked fine, but it looked like, well, this is Superman. This is the start of the DC Studios universe, whatever. This is the biggest superhero of DC, and it didn't quite, you know, live up to what I was kind of expecting, you know, in terms of on a visual scale, because Superman the movie set the bar quite high with its, you know, level of production. It was an epic, and this isn't an epic at all. But that, I know, that shouldn't be the fault of a movie. If I've gone in expecting it should be an epic, but if you're telling a story of Superman, it's often the case they kind of go hand in hand, Superman and big scale.
You're far more eloquent than I managed to be, because it really is a case of all modern pictures, if you like, are built with this kind of lack of attention span in mind. So, you know, we are always trying to get to the next thing. So it is probably the best example of spectacle over substance that you're ever likely to see in that regard. Again, it's not. Yeah, I had to keep reminding myself that this isn't for me. This picture, it's for, you know, that generation that you're talking about right now. And if that's the kind of kinetic experience, cinematic experience that they're after, that they're used to, and that they want, then that's fine. I don't think it's a very it's an economical way of storytelling, but then I don't think it's particularly good storytelling, because if you're having to work as an audience to try and keep up with what's going on, and it's not demonstrated to you in a fluid kind of way, then you've kind of failed with your mission. And again, like you say, if you're going to spend X million on a picture, admittedly that sequence was quite tense, because I thought that little green Mekon baby had it.
But then when he used his freeze breath, or to blow himself away from the black hole, it kind of, I felt the sort of the geometry of the whole sequence felt weird because one angle is going one way, then he's going another way. And I thought editorially it kind of looked a bit messy, and I was like, what's happening here? And suddenly he sort of blows himself away from the black hole and he escapes. I'm like, okay, now we're there. But I don't know. I just felt the whole sequence was a bit of a mess in terms of execution.
Why even work so hard to do something like this when you've already got everything that you need? Just consult the source material. Why wasn't that the Phantom Zone?
Yeah.
Why didn't he, if he's such a genius, why didn't he tap into the Phantom Zone? They're saying everything could have applied there. I mean, and then it would have had some familiarity too, because, even the casual viewer knows what the rules of that place is that, you're just reduced to kind of matter, and there's only one way in and one way out. So, it's so fussy with everything else. There's no reason why he couldn't have said, no need for any of this. He invested so much in, the cost of, all those square cells and everything, when you really start to root down into the silliness of it all. If you're in a desert wasteland like in the Phantom Zone, you've not even got to worry about that. They've just got to worry about them killing each other. And was
there any like characters within those cubes that were kind of like hidden Easter eggs? Because I tried to look, because the IMAX screen was so big at the screening. You had to sort of turn your head. But did you spot anyone hidden away?
No. Again, that was a fabulous opportunity. But he did everything but put Donald Trump into one of those. He did everything but.
The cubes. To me, that comes from Judge Dredd again, where
Yep.
you're arrested, you go to the cubes.
Absolutely, go to the cubes. Exactly. See, he does this, and he thinks he's kind of clever with it all. But it's like at every juncture, at every turn, your mature viewer is going, seen that before, seen that before. This business about, I'll tell you what really bothers me again, is, he's obviously got to the point of the script where he's saying, right, we're going to trash Superman on social media, right? This is how people are really ruined in today's society. We're going to destroy him online. And in the scripts, a bunch of Luther's monkeys work on trashing Superman during social media. And he's presented that, and some bright arsehole has said, you know what, James, we should actually make those monkeys like real monkeys. And
I thought that when I saw that was a bit far-fetched, because it was just so out of nowhere. I was like, he's gone monkeys?
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
That's a great idea. Let's do that. How are we with monkeys? It says, well, the bunch of them that were in Indiana Jones and the Kid of the Crystal Skull, they've not worked a day since. So I think if we bring those guys in, I think they'll probably be willing to do that one scene. Oh.
Okay, Mike, let's get to the film's score, the soundtrack.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
Looking at the trailers.
Okay.
They all deployed the Superman theme to a certain extent. There's one trailer which had, I think it was just called Rivalry. And it's got and it uses the theme quite well. It's a bit like, when The Force Awakens came out. And there's there's John Williams' theme, but it's kind of modernized, very heavy drums, and it's kind of to appeal to a new audience, right? But it had the themes there, and it worked quite well. And they were doing that with the Superman trailers. But when it came to the film, you've only got half of the music or the theme. It's a bit like the Ruby Spears Superman cartoon. They could only license 30 seconds of it or something, and the rest of it's all different. But in this, I was like, okay, you're building up Superman. Oh, there's no payoff, and there's no sort of swelling of the music, and the rest of the score, I couldn't even remember any of it. It was, to me, I summarised as the perfect example of what's wrong with modern film scores. I don't know if you feel the same.
If you're going to have that theme, if you're going to use that as the basis to get the interest, and I think that's fundamentally the point, actually. I think he used that to drop in on his trailers. And admittedly, the strains of near on electric guitar get the hairs and everybody's neck stood up, including mine. But again, he's so clever, because I just think that he needed it for that. I don't think, because it's James's world, I don't think that he needed. If you could have done away with it, and because it's so good, he kind of like, well, you know what? That's Superman's theme. That's Superman's costume. This is Superman's theme. I've got to stick it in there. But it doesn't mean that I've got to have it permeate the entire picture. So he kind of peppers it on occasion where dramatically it fits. But the rest of it, you're right about it not being memorable, because I can't remember a single note, and it doesn't do anything necessarily to enhance the experience. I don't think he wants anything other than the interrupting that drive, because if we're talking about enhancing scenes with music, which he likes to do, but all that weird business about that pop group that Clark's into that goes over the end credits, what was that about? And
it didn't work for me at all. I think it should have ended with the theme.
He's so from the opening narration or text, he is shoving the whole thing through as fast as he possibly can, and he only uses anything other than his narrative and his comedy and his spectacle. If he has to rely on anything else, he'd rather have it aside, because there's no major scene where the music drives it forward.
I don't think James Gunn is really interested in film scoring process. I think he's more interested in the needle drop of songs. And
he likes his music. He doesn't like his scores.
No, well, it doesn't. I mean, this film has 2 composers, and then when I was sitting there at the end credits, I think it had like 8 orchestrators, and I was like, wait. Okay, most of it sounds like a keyboard version of Superman theme, but then they had violins, all these orchestral players there. And I thought to myself, back in the day, even now actually, with the other composers, Howard Shore, Lord of the Rings, he would compose, conduct, and orchestrate the score himself. Where you've got 2 composers who can't orchestrate a score, and they've got like 8 other people to do it for them. And I'm like, and the music that's as a result of that is the most generic film score music you could come up with. I think they had the pressure. John Murphy did work with Danny Boyle, and I think he worked on 2 of the Guardians, or maybe the 3rd one. But the pressure, there's always going to be a pressure for a composer to do Superman. And Hans Zimmer had felt that. He didn't want to do it. He didn't want to replace Williams, but he did. He took a risk, and it worked for some, and some it didn't. But at least he took the risk. But in this, they used the Superman theme, but the rest they caught chicken out and just give you what's expected to play it safe. I think
if he was that brave, he could have done a Kubrick and just sourced music. He didn't have to include any of that. He could have saved a lot of money by just going, well, I want that song there, that song there, that song there, because look, there is nothing to drive the narrative.
No. If Superman Returns, John Ottman did a wonderful job of combining Williams with his own new material, and it's a proper big score, big orchestral score. Every track there's music, and you recognise it. It's a bit, it's very traditional. That's what Bryan Singer wanted, and I think Bryan Singer famously said, well, John Ottman had said we should have a song at the end credits, and he just sort of, Bryan Singer stared him down like he'd said something heinous or something criminal, and but James Gunn was like, no, we're doing a song at the end. I'm like, that doesn't work for me. I don't like this.
It's your audience. Again, it's like the audience at the end was sitting there, were rocking away to that daft song, and you're like, wow, okay.
There was a part of me though, like you saying, like this is for a new audience. And when I walked out with Tim, I thought to myself, am I just too old now? I'm in my 40s. This isn't for me anymore. But there's parts of it that worked well for me, and I think, well, if it just changed this and that, then it would work perfectly for me. It's not like what's written isn't appealing. It's just the terms of the technical execution of things and the creative choices I found didn't work, but also sort of the fundamental things of filmmaking as kind of not on display in some cases. I'm like, well, it's kind of, I enjoyed the Suicide Squad he produced and directed a number of years ago, but it's kind of like you take that format and just throw Superman into it. It's basically the same thing.
He was asked recently, was it painful to leave the MCU? And he said, well, no. And you can see why, really, because he's basically got Superman to transfer into a free transfer of the Superman character into the MCU. That's how it feels. Yeah. It doesn't feel like, this is, I know that this is the relaunch and reimagining of DC, but it certainly doesn't feel like that. It just feels like a continuation of what's currently going on in the MCU. And, you could, I don't think that the general audience can really kind of cares about that distinction. What's a Marvel film? What's a DC film? It's just another superhero film, and therefore, it's very much in the same classification as what Marvel have been doing for the last 20 years. But I'll tell you this, I think that the Marvel or the MCU, I've gone back recently and watched a couple of them. I don't think they've dated very well at all, which is sad, because my favourites were the first Avengers and the Winter Soldier, both of which I don't think have dated particularly well.
Well, even the Winter Soldier?
I watched, even the Winter Soldier, no, I thought that looked kind of dated. The only one that I thought had any sustainability that was a little more timeless and would probably go on was the first Captain America, the Joe Johnston one. I watched that and thought, now here's something that still looks good and is still kind of a compelling kind of story that doesn't seem to...
It has the novelty of being set in the past as well, so it doesn't...
There is that,
yeah.
I guess. But it did manage to include all of the Marvel stuff, and they do that so much better. The other characters, that when they bring other characters in, they tend to blend them gently, whereas this,
well, they were taking their time.
Tried to do the same thing. They were taking their time.
Well, wasn't that the problem with Warner's last DCU? Was with the Zack Snyder stuff? It was straight away, it was rushing it, and now this fundamentally feels like they've kind of jumped in the deep end with everyone already into it, and think, well, where's the build up? And so I'm intrigued to see where it's going to go. I mean, I'd happily, I'm more than happy to see David again as Superman. I want to see him again as Superman. I want to see, how the character's going to evolve, because we didn't see Superman, as with Henry Cavill's interpretation, really evolve. I mean, his performance didn't evolve at all. He just stayed the same. So, on repeated viewing, Martin, we may sort of warm to some of its kind of faults and go, okay, our initial reactions are out of the way, but I kind of may have changed. But I think, the film is not completely for me, but there's elements there I like. But how would you summarise your overall thoughts on James Gunn's Superman?
We're 20 good years and 20 years worth of box office receipts behind. And I think that there's a lot of catching up to do in a very short time, and I think that we're trying to force it. I say we, only in a collective sense that it's it's a character that we're all very passionate about. It's a start in terms of introducing it to a new generation. It works on that level. It didn't work for me cinematically. It didn't work for me as a story. It didn't work for me as anything other than something I could appreciate for that new audience. If that's the way it's going to continue, and I think it will, I think it will just continue to go in that direction. But, in summary, if you walk out of a Superman movie and you think to yourself, well, Mr. Terrific was the best thing about that, then something has gone very, very, very wrong, because I shouldn't even be thinking about anything other than the sweetness of the Lois and Clark relationship. That should be the bracket that this whole thing is contained in. And wasn't Superman awesome? But when Superman is only as awesome as everything else around him and gets lost in the melee, then you just kind of feel as hollow as you do with most of these modern superhero films, where they, like Shazam, it's just you just come out of it and like, wow, that I've kind of got a migraine. And I think it was fun. It didn't work, but it didn't work for me. But then, my saying with this kind of thing is always the same, and that is, we'll always have Raiders, which is a metaphor for it doesn't matter what else you do, because Raiders of the Lost Ark still exists. It doesn't matter what you do, because I've still got Jaws. You can't hurt me because I've got Back to the Future. You can do whatever you want with Superman, because we've got what Donna left behind. You can't take it away from us, so go have fun. But, don't expect me to, for a moment, be taken with what you're going to do if you're going to go off and do such unrestrained weirdness. It works within its own framework. It's not for me. Have a great time.
I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to click the like button and hit the bell to be notified of my latest reviews. Big thanks to my patrons and YouTube members for supporting the channel. If you want to get involved and gain access to exclusive videos and take part in Q&As, follow the link below.